TV graphics. You know, the little words you see on the screen, you can see them on CNN, you can see them on religious programs, you can see them on political programs. Television uses an enormous number of graphics, and that's because they matter. They really convey a message beyond the message that you're hearing. Problem is, when it comes to churches or ministries or nonprofit organizations, when we do videos, when we do live streaming, when we do broadcast TV, we don't get graphics right. We make a big mess of it and a big mistake. And so today, if you're a video producer, a television producer, graphic designer, artist, or if you're a pastor or leader that does media, I want you to listen, because we're going to talk about how to make effective graphics that can really make a huge impact on how people perceive your message and your program. TV graphics, let me tell you something. They matter more than you can possibly think. And it's obvious, because you don't see any news programs without extensive use of TV graphics. You don't see political or talk shows without graphics. And certainly ministry programs, nonprofit, religious programs need to be more effective in the way they use graphics. So I wanted to give you some key points that I've experienced over the years. I mean, when I started, I'm going to reveal my age a little bit, because when I started, we literally used a black card with white letters, and we would put it up on a music stand or some kind of an easel, and we would shoot it with a camera, and we would chroma key that over the program. That's how far back I go. And so we went from there to really simple chyrons. Remember the Chiron company? Some of you folks may remember that. Doing a little more sophisticated graphics, and a little more and a little more and a little more. And now with desktop editing, with nonlinear editing, it's just amazing what we can do with graphics. But here's the deal. The original purpose has not changed. We use graphics to convey information beyond what the speaker is saying, what the host is talking about, because we can take in information on multiple levels at a given time. And so your graphics are far more important than you probably think. And let me give you some tips for your television producer, for your director, for your graphics people. These are things that I think are really important when it comes to doing effective graphics on television in particular. Number one, listen to the program host, the preacher, the talk show host, whatever. Just listen to them. I'm just stunned, particularly with religious television, how often I watch Christian programming and the pastor's talking about something emotional, something really important, something really, really intense, and suddenly, boom, up pops a graphic about how you can contribute or where we're located. A graphic that has absolutely nothing to do with what the pastor or the host is saying. Just listen. Make sure the graphics support that point of the message. Support that. It could be scripture graphics. It could be fundraising graphics. It could be here who this ID graphics, who this guy is or who this woman is, whatever. We need to be sensitive to what the host is saying. So we don't interrupt a really important or intense moment, but B, we use graphics that actually support what the pastor, what the host is saying. So listen, just listen. So important. Number two, remember what I call the 6 to 9 minute rule. And this comes from years and years of producing television, where I've discovered that in most cases, particularly when it comes to religious or inspirational television, the audience is tuning in and out roughly every 6 to 9 minutes. Every 6 to 9 minutes, you're having people coming into the show and then leaving the show, which means that person doesn't know what's going on. So it's important to use graphics. I cycle them in about 6 to 9 minute cycles to let people know who this is, where it's coming from, and what the show's about. And you can do that real gently. You can do it tastefully, but put it this way. It's like sports programming. Remember when I was younger and watch a ball game or watch a football game, you'd tune in, and they didn't do much in the way of graphics back then. And you never know you'd go for 10, 15 minutes without knowing what the score was. It would drive you crazy. Then they finally got wise, and they started putting the score either on the bottom of the screen or in the top corner of the screen. The score stays up all the time now because they know people are tuning in and out throughout the game. Same way with a sermon, same way with an educational program, same way with an inspirational program. People are tuning out roughly every 6 to 9 minutes. So at the very minimum, put in the URL, put in a phone number to respond to, put in ID graphics so we know who this person is and what this is all about. Don't overload people. but roughly, I would say a good rule is every 6 to 9 minutes. That's when people are tuning in or tuning out. Number 3, be sensitive to the content. Just don't insert a phone number, address, or URL anywhere. In this sense, you want to make sure it's not a distraction. You want to make sure it's not a distraction. And this goes along, too, with the design of the graphics. I know, we've gone through phases, and I've seen so many shows where the designer is trying to be so creative that they put in sparkles and twirls and little clouds, and it floats in and it materializes in weird ways. In most cases, that's just a distraction. I don't impress me with your graphic creativity. I'm not there to see that. I'm there to hear this message from this speaker. So the graphic should almost be so subtle, we hardly even notice them. We obviously will register and we will notice them, but you want them not to be distracting. So always step back and think, is this taking away from the message of the speaker, or is this adding to the message of the speaker? That's really important. And by the way, along that line, focus on clean, easy to read graphics. And some of this comes from knowing your audience. Very, very often a program's audience will be largely older folks. So having this super tiny font size is just not going to work. Even though today we live in a world where most people have bigger screens, still think about your audience. If it's younger people, great, do whatever you want. But if it's older people, particularly with nonprofit organizations doing a kind of a fundraising special or an infomercial type show presenting your cause, if a significant number of your donors are older, make sure the graphics are readable. They can still be tasteful, they can still be well designed, but just make sure they're readable. Number 4, clutter. Think about clutter. So often we fill the screen with graphic information. We put the phone number, we put the prayer line, we put the post office box, or we put the street address, put the guy's name or the woman's name. We're trying to put so much on the screen at one time, it's overwhelming. And that goes back to distraction. You just don't want to distract people. Clutter is a big deal. So when you do graphics, remember, you've got a 30-minute show, you've got a 60-minute spot, you've got a 60-second spot or a 90-second spot, whatever. Think of structurally how I want to arrange this so it doesn't feel like the screen is just filled with clutter. Now, I will say this, because of news, particularly 24-hour cable news, people are used to seeing more graphics, because you'll know cable news has the time of day, they'll have the temperature, they'll have the little subtitles going across of the stories they're covering and the key bullet points of the news story they're doing. So people are used to seeing more, but still I would err on the side of not being too cluttered. Number 5 is size. Size. You know what? I'm all for good design, but also think about who your audience is. If your audience is little kids, we need to think about bigger graphics. If your audience is older people, we need to think about bigger graphics. So I love great design, but the truth is, you want a response from people. If you're using graphics, you want people to understand what you're saying and you want a response. So it's foolish not to put it in a font size that they will be able to see and recognize. I think that's understandable enough. But just think about that. Too many people don't think about it. And particularly when you're editing, the editor is sitting there in front of a big monitor, 2 feet from the screen or less? So it's easily readable to him. I always like to think about, okay, what's it going to be like when my grandmother is watching from across the room, or when I'm even watching across the room, or little kids are watching across the room. Think in terms of being realistic. I think that's important. Number 6 is, if it's a scripture or key points from your message, write them on the screen. I'll tell you, something that was really revolutionary for me a number of years ago, I read a study that when you use graphics effectively, people remember up to three times as much of your content just by having the graphics on there. So what does that say about scripture? I mean, if you're doing a Christian program, nobody's sitting at home watching your program with their Bible open. Or I'll just say very few, trust me, very few are. So help them along. Don't just have the pastor read a scripture, put it on the screen. Put it on the screen. Now, if he's doing this super long passage, okay, we could go through between a number of pages, or maybe it's too long to do, but when at all possible, put the scripture up there. It makes a huge difference for retention. Remember, if people are remembering 3 times as much, that matters. And I feel like the same thing for his sermon points. Put the key points. If I'm shooting a TED Talk, if I'm shooting anything else, I'd want to see the key points of the message up there in a graphic form. So whatever kind of educational program you're doing, kids program, if it's content you're trying to get across, don't be afraid to use it in graphic form, because that does a huge, this really, really helps retention. Number 7, style. And this is maybe the most important of all. Style is important, but response is more important. Think about that for a minute. Style is important. This is not the moment to show off how creative you are with graphics. This is not the moment for sparklies. This is not the moment for graphics that materialize out of nowhere and distract us from the message of the viewer. We want to get a response. Give me the phone number. I want to know the website. I want to know the email address. I want to know the social media handles. How can I contact this organization, particularly if you're asking money for a great cause you're doing, an outreach, some kind of a mission in another part of the world, and you're trying to do fundraising. Make it simple. Make it easy. So a fundraiser told me one time that the single biggest mistake people make is when it comes to fundraising, they don't grease the skids of what they want people to do. He said, make it easy for people to do what you want. And I see so many shows today where they're asking for me to participate, asking me for my financial support, but they don't put a phone number up. They don't put a web address up. They don't tell me how I can actually do it. Make it easy for people to give. It'd be really, really so helpful in your show. So that's graphics. Here's the thing. We live in a world where, graphics, the printed text are important. And we know from research that doing graphics well makes a big difference. People remember it more, they remember it longer, and it makes a bigger impact on their lives. So think in terms of how your graphics on your live stream, your video program, your social media, your short videos, how graphics could make a more powerful impact and a more important difference. Having a great designer on your team can be really critical to helping your message reach so many more people. And along that line, if you're a legacy television producer, if you work in a TV ministry or maybe a church producing television and your organization has done it for a long time, I just would encourage you to get my book, The Last TV Evangelist, why the next generation couldn't care less about religious media and why it matters. I wrote this book literally 10 years ago to help guide people through the media revolution. That was the heart of the digital revolution that was happening in this country. In fact, my friend Seth Godin even gave me a great endorsement on the cover of the book. And it's so helped people understand how to shift from the way we used to do media to the way we need to do media today. And as I said, it's 10 years old, so there's a lot of stuff that you'll think that's a little bit dated, and it is. But the essential ideas behind this book are so important of why we need to update the way we share our message with the culture, or we're going to lose a generation. You can get it on Amazon. I encourage you to go to Amazon. You can pick it up there. The Last TV Evangelist, Why the Next Generation Couldn't Care Less About Religious Media and Why That Matters. It will help you rethink what changes we need to make in order to reach this culture with a message of hope. I'm Phil Cooke. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'd love to meet you at my blog at philcooke.com and see you there. Share this. We'd love to get the word out about what we're doing because we believe it's so very important.